Last week I built some floating islands, but I couldn't help but think there was something missing. So now I've gone back and changed them up a little. I've added a bunch of details to make these islands look a lot more realistic and natural. But it's still super easy to do, cheap and fast, everything that I love. So stick around as I show you how I added detail to these natural formations. So first things first is that green top. It just didn't look that great, so I'm going to take some chalk pastels and I'm going to carve them down to make it into a nice powder. I'm then going to take the powder and stipple it on in areas where I think there should be patches of dirt. This breaks up the monotony of the boring green. And the great part about these pigments is you can mix together all different colors. I add in some red here, but depending on what you're using, you could mix in any sort of color. The best way to break up the dirt and grass texture is to add some rocks as well. The only issue is if you want to have a flat top so you can place models on top without having to worry about them leaning side to side, rocks can often get in the way. So what I do is I push the rocks into the foam, and that makes it nice and flat and still adds that extra layer of texture and detail. This is something that I don't really continue doing, but I tried out on one of my islands. Just taking some of this coconut fiber, this long, stringy, fibrous material, and poking it into the islands down below. I thought these might be roots or something that were ripped out of the ground when the island came floating out, but it would end up being too much of a hassle to go and put these on every single island, so I just kind of scrapped it. So instead of those roots, I decided to make these really long vines. I got this idea from Campaign Terrain, and there'll be a link in the corner and in the description to see his video on how he makes them. This is a really cheap and easy technique that comes out looking so great. So I'm glad I was able to use it in one of my projects as well. While I'm waiting for those vines to dry, one thing that I also noticed is that these rocky formations usually don't just turn from grass straight into rock. There's usually a little bit of a gradient there. So I decided to go around the lips of all of these and haphazardly mix in some grey and brown of the chalk pastels. And that does a really good job of making it look a lot more natural, random, and sporadic. If you put the pastel pigment powder on with a wet brush, it tends to go on a little bit better, and it dries looking great too. I then use some tacky glue to secure the vines along the side of the stone. And you can make it loop around, hang down, or really anything you want. This technique is so versatile and can be used in so many different applications. It's amazing. I also just go crazy adding a bunch of different flocks to the top. I've got my yellow flock, which is just really fine pieces of foam painted yellow. I've got some green, which is the same but green, as well as some darker green sawdust flock that really makes it all look chaotic and natural. I'm then going to take my forest game mat and flip it to the other side. And onto this, I'm just going to use some spray paint to paint this blue. I give it a good coat of a dark blue, and then I come through sporadically with some lighter shades to add some more detail and texture to the whole thing. The great part about this is it can be used as the sky or the sea. At this point, I'm almost happy with it. However, there are still more details that I think I can put on. So I'm going to use some tacky glue, and I'm going to stick some multi-shade foam flock all around the bottom of the rocks. This way it looks like some greenery is growing through those vines or something like that. In some areas, I even use some green polyfiber on the vines to make it look like some moss or something is growing off it. And also in some places I put some white polyfiber to look like the island is floating up in the clouds. And there it all is put together. The great part is it was so cheap and so easy to do, and the results are just leagues better than what they looked like before. So if you have some old terrain that you made a long time ago, give some of these ideas a go to try and make it look even better than before. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video and subscribe to see more next week.